I was giving some attention to advocates of the Green New Deal recently, and in doing so, I encountered several statements like the following. Quote, scientists tell us that we must do everything to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we're already at 1 degree, end quote. Now, there's a problem with this type of claim. When the term must is used in this way, it's a prescriptive claim, a claim like should or ought. There's no scientific experiment within what is traditionally understood as the realm of science that allows a piece of science research to come to a should or a must in the conclusion. Science is descriptive. They describe the world. They tell us what is and is not the case. Science cannot tell us what should or should not be. Now, folks who know me are aware that I argue that we can, in fact, infer moral conclusions from purely factual premises. Value exists as a very real relationship between states of affairs and desires. And insofar as one can identify the relevant desires and identify how a state of affairs stands in relationship to those desires, one can determine if the people with those desires have reasons to bring about that state of affairs. But that's not what's being attributed to these scientists. Those premises are not being put into the physics of climate models. As such, those climate models cannot give us accurate climate prescriptions. They can give us accurate climate predictions, but they're not built to give us climate prescriptions. Now, economists can claim some authority to tell us should conclusions. Economists actually say something about value, but in looking at what economists say, a lot of them tend to be using an outdated 19th century conception of value, and they tend to think that all value can be measured in terms of a cash equivalent or willingness to pay. This, of course, is a gross oversimplification, but there's enough of this kind of thinking in the field of economics to render their should statements suspect. They may be able to describe the economic effects of certain policies, but in terms of prescribing policies, one needs to take some care. Now, doctors who are scientists do give prescriptions. The best way of understanding what a prescription is comes from the experience of a doctor prescribing a course of treatment. When a doctor prescribes some treatment, the doctor imports a set of desires into the recommendation. Ideally, the relevant desires are those of the patient. It's assumed, and quite reasonable to assume in the case of almost all patients, that the patient wants to live, wants to be free of pain, wants to reduce or minimize limitations to their movement and cognitive faculties. When one combines a set of desires with a set of factual descriptive statements, then one can prescribe a course of action for those who have the relevant desires. However, those prescriptions are only relevant to those who have the relevant desires, and only insofar as the doctor gets those relevant desires right. The person who's in the best position to judge whether desires built into a prescription are accurate is the patient, not the doctor, which is why prescribed treatments are recommended rather than required, at least when dealing with competent adults. Now, when one is prescribing for a country, a body that's made up of a multitude of people with a multitude of different desires and interests, and when one is talking about policy, something the government is going to force on some people against their will, the business of prescribing can get a lot more tricky. When it comes to making a prescription and determining how a set of descriptive facts relates to a large set of desires, the desires that scientists are prone to use are their own. This is no more true of scientists than it is of people generally, but it's no less true either. Biologists may desire that a particular part of the world remain or be put into a particular state. They note the effects of certain policies or projects in that area, which is contrary to what they desire. The honest way of presenting this set of facts is to report the fact, I prefer that this not be done. However, scientists, again, no less than non-scientists, are prone to take their sentiments as signs of outside, external, intrinsic value property that then somehow justifies, even requires government or public action to make sure that it's not done. The scientists, no less and no more than the rest of us, are prone to exaggerate any fact that is consistent with their goal while downplaying and ignoring the facts that would recommend some alternative. I'm not saying that the scientist is getting the facts wrong. I'm talking about a distinction between getting the facts wrong and determining which facts are important and the amount of their significance. It's possible to trust a scientist on what the facts are, but why should we accept the scientist's value judgments about the importance of those facts? The main problem with attributing the same level of precision and understanding to a scientist's prescriptive claims that we should, and note, I'm using the prescriptive word should, that we should give to their descriptive claims is that it serves to discredit and promote distrust of their descriptive claims. The claim that scientific research yields definitive conclusions about what we should do is an overreach. And if scientists are prone to making should claims that are beyond what their evidence strictly supports, then why should we accept their descriptive claims? This leads to a sense that scientists aren't to be trusted. They say things that their evidence does not support. Now, this is fallacious reasoning. The fact that a scientist overreaches and makes should statements that their research, strictly speaking, doesn't support doesn't prove that the descriptive claims are in error. There are ways to confirm the descriptive claims that cannot be used to verify the prescriptive claims. But fallacious thinking happens. It's a real-world phenomena with real-world consequences. And as I said, scientists are not immune. Scientists know that scientists are prone to fallacious thinking, as the rest of us are. In light of this knowledge, they require safeguards be put into place to aim to prevent biases from influencing their research. So I am making a prescription. In doing so, I'm relating a certain set of practices and policy to a set of desires. I'm saying that it is a bad thing to treat a scientist's prescriptions as having the same level of certainty and precision as their descriptions. False beliefs have a tendency of interfering with people's abilities to realize what they desire. For some people, this mistake elevates the merits of the scientist's prescriptions beyond what reason and evidence would support. For others, it diminishes the merits of the scientist's descriptions below that which reason and evidence would support. And both of these mistakes tend to make it more difficult for people to fulfill their desires. And that is what makes them bad.